I'm Micah Versman, and you're listening to the Producer Podcast. Today I'm joined by Nathan Tauch of Nathan Tauch Films to discuss an aspect of filmmaking that has become all the more important over the past year, live streaming and broadcast. So let's dive in and get started. Thanks for coming on today, Nathan.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm too accustomed to Zoom at this point, so
I think most of us are, unfortunately.
absolutely the little nuances of Zoom and Wirecast and Google Meets and every other platform that wants to jump on the bandwagon to make more accessibility and better communication for pretty much everybody in the industry and out of the industry for everything.
Yep.
I haven't found anybody.
I think I tried just about all of them in the past year because of one group or another too. But yeah, so maybe to start, just kind of take us through how you got started in film and what led you starting Nathan Tauch Films.
Sure. I was I grew up in a little town, Oregon, Illinois. Where not much was going on, honestly. And I kind of had some big dreams when I was very young. I knew exactly what I wanted to do and how I was going to accomplish it. And fortunately, I had some great friends and a lot of support to kind of get me to a point where I could leap. That was kind of the goal. I'd heard all these stories and I read all these books. I read Martin Scorsese's biography book, just kind of understanding how he got into film and how he adapted in his scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, well, I just got to get to the point where I could leap, and then then I'll be there. Well, little did I know that it would take 10, 11 years. Yeah, 11 years now. I've been working in film and making movies, because that was my initial thought. I want to make movies. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't have any of that stuff figured out. But anyway, so I started a lawn care company. So me and a buddy of mine started Lean Green lawn care services, and we just had, I don't know, I must have had 30 clients a week. It was crazy.
Oh, wow.
I was hustling. So out of my mom's SUV, I would drive around with a bunch of lawnmowers and some weed whackers, and we'd hustle, man. We get out there and start making money and doing our thing, and of course, wasting all the money on little trinkets and video games and things. But we we got to the point where this was a thing, and I realized, okay, I can build a business. My father was an entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. And very self-made, and that drive was kind of there and instilled on me. I didn't want some job that I was going to be bored every day at. And
Mm-hmm.
I know for some people, stability is like what they crave and what they need. I'm a psychopath, so I just run around like crazy, and I love the stress, I love the hecticness, and that's kind of why I ended up landing in broadcast. But we're not there yet. So I had my lawn care company. I was working for my dad at the time. I was working in lawn care. I thought, well, if I'm going to learn how to, make movies, I need to know photography. Mm-hmm. So I ended up getting a job as a school photographer, taking little snapshots of bratty little kids. It was it was just a beautiful experience, and it was a great company. But that actually taught me a lot about patience and working with people with no patience. And that if you can learn that skill early on, you can adapt to almost anything. And that's what, especially in the producer chair and the technical director chair, which I kind of sit in mostly,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have that patience, and you have to have that forethought to be patient and know when problems arise that you're not going to get heated. You're not going to get to a point where you're so flustered and frustrated you can't make a decision, especially when it relies on you in a split second. So I got rid of the company. I started making films with a friend of mine, and you know him, John Petrie.
Yep.
And so we made terrible movies in his living room. That was how we started. The amount of shirtless movies that we made with me and my brother when we were hopelessly ripped. Uh, and there's a video of Jonik. Yeah. Anyway, it's great. It's great. We're all like we did this parody of, I think, like the Predator or something like that. We're all just like firing into the bushes with like a bunch of Nerf guns, and we added all the sound effects and all. It was gold.
Nice.
It's somewhere in the ether. I'll find it. Go embarrass him. But then we made my most embarrassing film, which so before Captain America came out. Let's just put an age on it. We had this whole plot line of like the super soldier and all this kind of stuff, fighting, German soldiers and all this kind of stuff, but bioterrorism kind of stuff. And about halfway through our project, Captain America came out. I think it was like towards the end of the project or something. Maybe we're in middle of release, but we're like, oh, they stole our idea because we thought we were just these brilliant filmmakers. So it was the most embarrassing thing in my life. We had this whole premiere. I still blame Jonik for this. It's all his fault. They set up this whole premiere, the stage and everything. We walked out. I don't know. We had like 20 people in the audience. It was great. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. But this crazy like 50-foot screen, we're watching this terrible movie, which was all shot in like 480p at like 23 point whatever. And the compression was so good. It was so good. It was just complete garbage, and I loved it, but it was garbage. So after I got through my first film, I was like, yeah, this is going to be the thing. So I made another feature with a couple other friends of mine. It was also not so great. We had a lot of fun. We learned camaraderie. We learned all those kind of things. But everybody kind of knew it was fun. It was friends. So kind of preceding that, I started getting into more commercial filmmaking. Some people ask me, hey, do you know how to make a commercial? I said, sure, why not? And so every time I would say yes, in the back of my head, I was like, maybe this is the leap moment. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of my driving force behind it. So I had bought some better cameras, I bought better gear, I was saving up my money, I was doing all the stuff, I was working like 4 jobs at the time, stressing myself out. It was great, all preparing myself for broadcast. So after a couple of years of just doing corporate commercials and all that kind of stuff, eventually that kind of took over every other job that I had.
Okay.
But I wasn't quite there where I was, in a position to just do it 100% full time without something. So that moment really didn't come until I started working as a producer on a show with a law firm, Legal Matters. But I worked on that show for a while. And preceding that, I started getting into sports with a couple of the news stations. So they would send me out, and I'd start doing sports, more broadcast kind of stuff. And a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, that I know for years, was doing event work all over Rockford at the time. And he was starting to branch out into Chicago. So he said, well, you're doing all these films, and at this point, I don't know, I'd probably done well over 300-400 projects. I was pumping out, I don't know how many videos a month, but the demand was there. People were asking me for things. I was editing things. Every project that I could get my hands on was just a yes. Yeah. So when that kind of got to that point, he said, well, okay, I understand you're chasing all these things, but like, have you ever done this? Have you ever been in a live scenario where you're running everything, you're calling things, and you really have to put your brain to work? Because right now you're a fix and post kind of guy. You're shooting whatever on a script. You have no risk. Mm-hmm. It's all written down for you. And I thought, that sounds cool. So I didn't realize it, but that was my leap moment.
Okay.
That was that moment, and it went by like that. And I had no idea that it happened, and so I started working. and I was getting calls and calls. Hey, can you do this event? Can you do this? This. It got so crazy, and I started moving up very fast. I learned how to be a video engineer. I learned how to, really balance codecs and live streams and all different kinds of uh, all these balancing acts of being a producer, being an engineer, being um, uh, a TD. Everything kind of was learned in a very short amount of time. And about 6 months later, I was working on multi-million dollar projects pretty much every month.
Wow.
And I kind of I turned around. I was like, I need to backtrack for a second because like I have no idea when this happened or what was going on. But it was just cool. It was a lifestyle. It was just
Mm-hmm.
the way I hustle and the way I still do. I do multiple projects in a day. I take as much work as I can, just because I love that mental stimulus. It's just you have to keep moving and be so active and proactive in a live scenario and not let your guard down because as soon as you do, you screw up and you can't. You just can't. It's live. And fortunately, I was surrounded by people in the industry who had been there, you know, 15, 20, 30 years. And I was working with these larger companies now, who are hiring me, hiring my team, doing all these different facets and being able to just focus on specific areas that I really wanted to focus on, technical directing and video engineering and maintaining a broadcast. It was really it was heaven, man. Like it was awesome. And it got to the point where we everybody that I knew was just on insane projects. And you'd sit down with a bunch of guys who we just complained about shows that people would kill to be on. I ended up getting to work with Paramount. I ended up getting to work with Lionsgate. I worked with ESPN. I worked with I hate name dropping, but all these larger than life companies.
Mm-hmm.
Some some that I can't even talk about. Uh,
Gotta love that part of the industry.
yeah, the Illuminati is watching, so be careful. Um, we have to mind them. Thank you, Google. Anyway, don't get demonetized. Anyway, so, uh, but now I'm at a really great part of my career, which is high stress jobs that are extremely challenging, and I'm learning new things pretty much every month because the technology is always changing
Mm-hmm.
in live platforms, and we saw that with Zoom, with programs, even OBS and vMix, all these different tools to be able to accomplish what broadcast has been doing for years and years and years, like I was doing with the stations. Because in that kind of world, everything's kind of hidden away. You don't really understand it because those systems are put in place to be permanent. And
Mm-hmm.
there's variation, but not by much really. But now in today's live environment, and even before 2020, it was just constantly experimenting with different technologies to be able to effectively communicate to a live audience and to an audience that's somewhere else. Because I don't really think that a lot of the smaller contenders were taking like Facebook Live and YouTube Live seriously until
Right.
2020 really hit. They didn't know what they were preparing for because they were always kind of finicky platforms and you would have issues and there would be problems. But now we're in a place where the technology has kind of matched the demand and the need. And so we're seeing a lot more success in that, which is just phenomenal. I love
Mm-hmm.
it. I'm a nerd. I love it. It's it's always good times. But yeah, that's kind of how I got here. Um, and somewhere along the line, I had a beautiful daughter, and so we and I ended up back in Chicago. And so yeah, we're based out of Chicago now, but I work all over the world. It just kind of depends what the project is.
Nice. So I'm curious, what kind of attracted you to the more producing and overseeing projects as opposed to just being, that freelancer crew guy in the industry?
I didn't ask for it. wasn't my fault. It wasn't my job to start with, but it ended up
Okay.
being. So, yeah, I just naturally I'm a very confident and outgoing person, and unfortunately, when you put me with a bunch of homeschoolers, it just happens. All right, let's just be honest. Um, but but that's not to say I love the jobs that I participate in where I am working for someone else and
Mm-hmm.
I can make their vision happen. And a lot of the times that's why I'll sit in the engineering and the technical director chair. Because at the end of the day, yeah, the show is on your shoulders because you're hitting the buttons and you're tracking the pace of the show
Yeah.
itself. But you're never alone. See, the thing about broadcasting that I love so much is all about collaboration. It's live collaboration. There's no moment where somebody's on their own. It
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't happen. And jobs that, especially on my sets, if someone feels like they're on their own, that's a problem. I've screwed up.
Okay.
And the great thing is when I was first getting into live events, you had those people who would stand beside you, be like, "Hey, let's figure this out. This is your workflow. This is how you do that," and they'd work with you and they'd shadow you. Working with the unions was fantastic because you see guys who have 30 years of experience operating and doing their thing, and you can sit right there and you can watch them and you say, "How do you do that? How do you do this?" And they might get annoyed with you, but at the end of the day, you've been useful, and that place was not wasted on someone who didn't glean that knowledge. And
Yeah.
I guess that's the biggest part of it is that you never stop learning, and that you have to always accept personal growth, especially in your own skill set. You're never good enough. You're
Mm-hmm.
never good enough for live. The whole group is good enough for live, but you on your own, it just doesn't happen. And that's why I started my company, because I was just happened to be one of the people who I could always find work. I could always find work. I could always book a job. I could just go out. I was good at sales.
Yeah.
But I knew that not everybody's skill set was sales. So when I started the company, I thought, like, what if I could have a team of people that were all dedicated to just their skill sets? And I didn't have to wear every hat, but I could give someone the opportunity to wear that hat and exceed and excel in that. And that's kind of why I started the business. Um, it and, and the name I had I no clue what to call it really, um, other than like I don't know, the production company. I didn't care. I, I really I don't care about the company name. It's not about the company. It's not about me. It's about my
Mm-hmm.
team. Because if my team isn't there, and the project falls apart, it does not exist. Rob, uh, all my guys who have worked with me in the past, Michael, all great guys who have worked with me over the years, and Brendan, we've all kind of figured out a way how to work with each other and work to each other's strengths and all sit in the chairs that we need to sit in and not
Yeah.
overlap, because at the end of the day, when you're up, when that light's red and you're live, that that's your glory right there. You know, that's your time to shine. Um, and I guess that's what's so attractive about live, because it's not always glamorous, and that's the thing that I really hated about Hollywood and the scale at which like feature films kind of operate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the attitude that that the DP is some mystical wizard person and the director's some mystical wizard person and everybody has like these special. No, they're all reading from the same piece of paper. They're nothing without each other. And unfortunately, the egos in feature films was never attractive. It was just not attractive. But you know what was? We all complain equally in broadcast. Let me tell you that.
That's cool. So, one thing I'd love to hear about, because you were doing live streaming and broadcast well before 2020,
Yes.
And I had talked to some other production companies before 2020, and they were like exploring it, but their struggle was they were not able to figure out how to make it financially viable for their company. So how did you kind of overcome that challenge prior to the demand COVID brought for this?
Sure. Fair pricing and honesty.
Okay.
Mic drop. All right, you want to be real? Cinema videographers charge way too much for a service that they're going to be better at 10 years from now. Broadcast engineers are charging too much for a job they're going to be better at 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
So keep the price the same. That's what I've always preached. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter, what crazy features you have. It's just what it costs. That's always what I believed in. So if a cinematographer comes to me and says, "This is what I charge," that's what they charge. A lot of companies have all these different price points and all these different systems and all these different schemes to try to justify different elements of film. I don't treat it like that at all. I maintained low cost to high delivery by simplifying my systems from the get-go and being very open and honest about what things cost in the industry. When you go to a rental house and you have to rent an LED wall, you have to rent projectors, you have to rent video racks and all this kind of stuff, you're working in tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
What does the job require? Bottom line. It's a yes or no answer. It costs this. Yes or no? No. The job's not going to happen. That's how it is. And being very honest and open about that with clients was one thing that set us apart. And one thing that I heard in the industry, and fortunately it's kind of changed, is a lot of people would do the runaround, they'd upcharge on certain things, upcharge on labor, do all these different kinds of stuff. It just made no sense to me.
Yeah.
Because, working with my dad, a carpenter charges what a carpenter charges, and the materials cost what the materials cost. End of story.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I treated my business. And I think that integrity and that just open and honesty, when a client says, "Hey, can I see the bill?" I send them the bill. So this is everything. This is the breakdown. There's never a question of, well, why was this, or why was this more expensive than this? No, because it's just what it costs. Because when you're working with an event that's larger than life, say you're doing a concert, you have staging, you have lighting, you have cameras, you have trussing, you have rigging points, you have all these different elements. You have the equipment end, you have the labor end. If a client is not prepared with realistic expectations, I'm usually the first one to give them that expectation.
Yeah.
And say, this is just what it costs. And here's the breakdown. You can go to other companies, you can go get a quote, you can go get upcharged by somebody else. You can deal with these problems, you can do the runaround, or at the end of the day, you just pay what the industry asks. Labor and equipment. And approaching it like that, I've had success. I work with my clients very well. We have a lot of reoccurring clients. But it's always about expectation. If your expectation is to have a $2 million event, and your budget is $200,000, it's not realistic. Just not.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be cheap about it and have big issues, but I'm not going to make a cheap event for you. You're going to have to go to somebody else. Yeah. Because I can't suffer my clients like that. I care a lot about equality, not only to the client, but to the labor force. Because if you're paying me, you're paying the labor that I've hired, the people that have lives, they have families, all that kind of stuff. You're paying the rental houses, they have employees, they have stockpiles, they have forklift operators, they have salespeople. That in its culmination is circulation. And I think that's very important for clients to understand. But generally, when you're working with large-scale events, they have a very defined goal or objective. Like I remember a lot of people asking, well, can we do an event and sell tickets and pay for it with tickets? And no, that was always our answer.
Yeah.
Because in my experience, it's just not an effective way to pay for the cement for the rest of your building. You wouldn't put the budget for your chimney as the same amount of money as you would for your foundation. You just wouldn't. It makes no sense,
Right.
because you will fall and it will fail. And I've seen incredibly large shows cheap out in certain areas, and companies try to make it work and have horrible failures. And a lot of it's on equipment end, some of it's on labor end. It's all a balance. And as a producer, that's where I usually sit, trying to find that balance. What's what's going to be the sweet spot so that everybody is happy, that all the needs are met. And there's some shows that it's just there's no question about money, because they have their vision, they know what they want, and we're going to do that. With smaller shows with more tight budgets, we do get creative sometimes and try to figure out solutions, but at the end of the day, those fundamentals are always there and they just don't change. So yeah, I know a couple of my good friends tried to branch off into live stream. A lot of it was just the technology was more difficult and more expensive back
Yeah.
then, and it it still is. It's not to have an effective show. You need the gear and the know-how to be able to accomplish it. Bottom line, it's not a matter of. It's not like cameras. It's not like labor. It's very strategic. It requires a lot of planning. And a lot of people don't realize how much work goes into a 1 hour 1 hour event, sometimes only a 20-minute event. There's a lot of prep work, there's a lot of details that need to be taken care of, and when you're working with a very large scale company, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, because you have 50 plus people working on one project, and there's how many projects in a week? It's dozens, 20, 30, all with different crews, all with different. It's so much work and so much going on that you have to have people, number one, who know what they're doing, but also have the support in equipment and or technologies. And technologies, I include education, because I've worked with a lot of companies that do not provide an education. They just say, hey, get in the ringer, and shows fail. But those companies that take a little bit of technology's route with education often are more successful, because they take the time to work with their laborers and their contractors, employees. It doesn't matter. You should treat them exactly the same. That's what we do. So I guess that's why we ended up staying afloat.
Oh, that's good to hear. So I want to jump back to kind of where you're talking about when the client's coming to you. So when it comes to live streaming and broadcast, what type of questions are you asking to really help figure out what the client needs?
Usually the first question I'll ask is, have you done this before? Have you done this before? Do you know what to expect? What was the expectation? What did they do? Show me a video. Show me what you're doing. And if they have, it is so much easier to work with them, because you have a clear vision. You don't have to build things from scratch. You have kind of a blueprint, and you're able to either exceed that or maintain consistency, because a lot of clients want things consistent. especially when you're
Okay.
working with a large corporate client. And to be able to duplicate that, you have to make sure that you are within those, number one, budget limitations and labor limitations. Because now with COVID, excuse me, we have a lot of challenges, especially with how many people we can have on site, how many, what needs to be tapped in from outside, what needs to be Zoom, there's just so many different
Mm-hmm.
factors now. It makes it more complex. But then the next step is I usually say, hey, let's walk through your vision. Not so much a question. I just want to know how does your show go? Like before I know the elements, before the cameras, before all that is nonsense unless they have a vision. And so then it kind of splits at that point. There's either a person who says I know exactly what to do, and then there's a person who says I have no idea what's going on. My boss is standing on my neck right now and I need to make this happen. And I'll be like, "All right, fine. You know, I'll make this work." Um, so and at that point, it's more just figuring out the logistics. So if you're going down the trail of, oh well, you have two big projector screens and and a stage. Well, now you start building your quote and writing things down and making sure that you're getting their physical expectations met.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're working in a live space, you have a ballroom. Your stage could be 8 feet or 80 feet. Well, which is it? How much backup do you need? What kind of projectors? Is the venue union or non-union? Is the loading dock accessible? Have you booked this venue? Are you sold on this venue? There's a plethora of questions that need to be asked, and usually I knock out those hard hitting ones straight up front. Is this hey, we're going to build this for you, or is this hey, your team and my team are going to collaborate, or is this we walk in, we do our job, and we leave? It just kind of depends. And then you have the other clients, which you're just supplementing to another company's labor force, which is
Okay.
hey, this is an agency. We need a couple of video technicians and a camera op. Okay, great. Then we send them over and we do the job, and there's not as much prep work because they have everything figured out. It just kind of depends on the project, honestly. But at the end of the day, you just have to know what you're walking into. And I find that my list of questions, between the first phone call and the day I step on site, there's probably 500 to 600 different questions that get launched back
Wow.
and forth because there's just way too many elements. Especially, I did this project last fall for a Jewish community up in Skokie, and we worked in pre-production on that project for 7 months to make that happen. It was a 4 week, 4.5 week project, streaming multiple times a day on the weekends, 3 separate rooms, I think eight or nine cameras. I had, I don't know, 14, 15 guys on set, all operating. There's lots of engineering. We brought in another company to do audio. They had an audio system for talkback per room to be able to send broadcast and split it up between custom mixes in people's headsets, all different kinds of stuff. So in that scenario, you stay in your lane. So the
Mm-hmm.
video guys do video things, the audio guy do audio things, the lighting guys do lighting things. And that kind of just simplifies things and makes life so much easier for everybody. So that the questions that are being asked go to the producer. I send out a list of questions to the client, and they return, and we get the show done.
Okay.
I guess that's the phrase of the day. Just get the show done. However it needs to happen, you know. But even then, there's projects that you show up and there's expectations that either I had or the client had that just don't work on site. And when you're there, those can be big money decisions. I've had
Mm-hmm.
a client add on about 30,000 worth of lighting just out of the blue, just because, hey, I want to light an entire another room, I want to set up an entire trussing system, and you're like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And if they have the means and the ability to do that, that's fine, because we can make it happen. It's just one of those
Mm-hmm.
expectation things. And before 2020, unfortunately, the industry kind of got to this point where there was just really no respect for the people doing the broadcasts in a lot of ways.
Okay.
And so what you'd see is a lot of frustration between clients and technicians, or producers or salespeople, because these shows were just crazy larger than life, and the amount of people and the amount of things that were happening all in tandem, it was really something. It was really
Yeah.
something, and that's kind of coming back, and hopefully the organization that's kind of happened in 2020, now that everybody's kind of forced to work in studios, work together, work in tandem, really spend that time to perfect things, because that's your only way out. There's no live audience to laugh at the jokes. You don't have that safety blanket like there was. And so you had a
Mm-hmm.
lot of shows that were just kind of average, unfortunately. And now you're finding a lot higher quality productions, especially with, even a lot of the places in Chicago here. I've seen pretty much all the AV companies just step up their game and hiring really quality people to work on their projects, which is just
Yeah.
fantastic. Better quality, better life.
Definitely. For sure. Have you found that there are common misconceptions that business owners maybe have if they're just, this is brand new to them, that and then, like, what are some ways you help educate them to better understand those misconceptions?
For live stream, you mean? When
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it just kind of depends. Because I've had a lot of a lot of clients come in and think it's very plug and play. It can be. It can be. But that that provokes the next question, which is, do you have the budget to make it plug and play?
Mm-hmm.
Because if your event is in a week, it's not one person who does all these jobs.
Right.
It's a whole team. And so I think doing a little bit of research, understanding all the jobs, understanding everything that goes into making a production smooth and safe. So safety is another thing. The safety of the stream. Making
Mm-hmm.
sure that it is consistent, that you have backups, investing in backups. Even though if nothing goes wrong with your project and you feel like you wasted money because nothing bad happened, that is the best broadcast. That would be, and I bet if you said that to anybody in the industry, they'd understand that feeling, because in the old world pre 2020, you'd have clients come up to you and be like, this was so expensive, and like, I don't understand why we had these backups and all that kind of thing. And I would just quietly say, Murphy's Law is a real thing. It
Mm-hmm.
really is. It really is, because there are shows that are absolute nightmares, and the client sees none of it because we're
I bet.
because we're really great at our jobs. we 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 just have a really high tolerance for stress. That that is another thing that I guess is not understood, how stressful a live show can be. I know I heard of a couple guys who peed their pants on their first broadcast because of the stress level, especially on high end shows. And it,
Mm-hmm.
it it sounds humorous, but it's a thing, you feel that weight, like this is live. If you screw up, they know who did it. Like everybody's in their department. Like there is a lot of pressure. And that's why having a great producer working with a client outside the technical aspect is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had shows where one thing was incorrect on a PowerPoint and a client came running and screaming and shouting, and it was pretty intense at this poor little graphics guy who wasn't even running the PowerPoint, but he had a really big monitor, so he looked like he was doing something. So he just happened to be the target, and so the salesperson comes running over. Oh, it's all right, ma'am. It takes her out of the room. But understanding the process and really going over everything and preparation. If you don't have your videos in order, if you don't have your content, the proper spelling of everyone's name on the Google Docs file when you send it over, you have to double check, triple check, and make sure, because whatever you send is what goes up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I don't think everybody understands. Is that as soon as it's locked in, it's locked in. And you don't want to be making changes last minute, because that's risk. That's huge risk. That's inviting risk into a thing that is already planned and has a system, and you're relying on a last minute decision for a long-term video, which is rough. So, I mean, it's just an expectation. Preparation, making sure you communicate with your producer and be as accurate as possible with that communication. If you don't want something, you have to say something. Or if you want something in particular, you have to say something. More technical things. A lot of people come in with really grandiose designs and realize very quickly that the amount of work and the amount of labor is just beyond their means. Simplifying things is often more effective, because at the end of the day, all you're doing is communicating. So at a base level, if you can communicate effectively, let's build from there. But when you come with this gigantic, beast of a project, a lot of the expectation is, okay, I understand you've either done this before or you're looking to build something very complex, and I hope you know what that entails. And for those larger scale clients, oh yeah, they say, hey, here's the keys of the kingdom, go. And you build it, you do a great job, and you push it out. And that's the way to do it. But when you're working with those medium budgets where you have to really adjust workflow, or try to work with someone, or you're working with their team and working with your team, there can be lapse in communication. There can be things that are straight up not approved because they just got pushed out. But that's also on the responsibility of the filmmakers themselves to be able to send proofs and to make and make sure that communication is there, and being open and honest about, hey, this is done, this is not done, why isn't it done? Push your graphics guy a little bit more, so he doesn't get yelled at. He will be.
That's good.
We love our graphics guys. We yell at them in love.
Yeah, sometimes people need that. So, what does what does maybe as average as it can get, an average pre-production process look like for broadcast, and how does that maybe vary some compared to like a normal narrative film project?
Sure. It can be either very quick or very slow. There's not really an exact. Some sporting events that I've done have required, 5-6 months of prep before actually, moving into the project. Some of it is usually it's all based on a deadline. Usually clients will come in with, hey, we're doing this on this day. It's at the Marriott, and this is what's expected. Show up and do this. And we make it happen. And a lot of the times it's communication between yourself and maybe the in-house crew, of like a ballroom or something. When you're working like a stadium, stadiums are kind of tricky because usually that goes through like an agency, or there's usually a union involved. That's a whole nother beast of a project to work on. But usually the pre-production will be based off of an initial design. Either a sketch or a design artist will come in and take care of that. Typically hired by the client outside of us. There are shows that we design ourselves, and those are usually smaller scale. But it just kind of, that also, it depends on what kind of show. If you're doing a concert and you're having a bunch of pyro, or you're having a bunch of crazy lighting effects and things, that might be an area where you hire a lighting design tech who can take care of all that, and engineer the structure itself so that it's approved, so that this massive 10,000-pound rig that you have sitting over everybody's head doesn't come crashing down on everybody. There's a lot that goes into it. So yeah, it's kind of a tricky question, just because there's not a definitive length of time. Oftentimes we're still building shows a week before, either because there are changes on client's end, or there's venue changes, there, or weather. Weather's another thing. I've had events where it was all scheduled for outdoors, and 24 hours before the event they said, no, we're moving the entire thing. It's going to be in this ballroom. Completely different budget, completely different setup. Nothing was the same. And we had to make it happen. And we did. And, you just have to kind of be on your toes for that. Especially on the producing end. Because when those changes come, you have to be able to take the call and make those decisions and be confident and have enough technical knowledge of every single facet to be able to go and get. Because at the end of the day, if you cannot deliver, that's a big problem for client, and that's not acceptable in broadcast. You make it happen. That's just how it is.
Yeah. Because you mentioned how a lot of it, the pre-production is kind of set by when the deadline is for the project. How do you gauge if what the client's wanting to do is doable by that deadline or not?
We just make it happen.
Okay.
Honestly, some of the turnarounds that we have been able to accomplish are insane. I think I put together an entire concert live stream. It was probably a 6-hour event in the course of maybe 36, 38 hours, something like that.
Oh, man.
So, last minute project. Everything was crazy. I was calling people, trying to get all the equipment in, trying to hire everybody. Yeah, that was early on, but that was one of the most stressful projects that I was ever on, because it was just a ticking clock. They said, "Hey, can you make this happen?" But it's not always that hectic. A lot of the times it's very simple. Sometimes you're sitting at home, and the day is almost over, and you're ready to go to sleep, and you're so prepared to just zonk out, and then you get a phone call that says, "Hey, we have this Japanese client who really needs this done. We just had our video technician got sick. Can you come in and do this show? You know nothing about the project. It's 20 minutes away. Drive over and do the show." And that's the thing, is like you have to be on your toes and be able to accomplish things, and just be very confident in your abilities. And that's where education, I find, is the most important element of broadcast.
Yeah.
And just constantly teaching yourself things and looking things up and reading and exposing yourself to things that you normally wouldn't do. And that's kind of how I ended up getting into Facebook Live and YouTube Live and all this kind of stuff, just because I didn't see anybody doing it, and I wanted to know how how does that work? Why, what couldn't we make out of this? Like, I didn't even have the intention really of, hey, I want to monetize this. It was like, I just want to figure out how it do. Like, that's about it. And a lot of that has just led to really great relationships and really great opportunity in my life, and a lot of people who work for us, their lives as well. And of course, the clients benefit because
Right.
a lot of the time they're just none the wiser to how we go about producing and getting these projects done, just because we're all really good at just going and get.
Yes.
That's at the end of the day. I really admire a lot of my peers for being able to be so versatile, because I knew I wasn't quite in that place when I was first starting, to just be able to jump in, and I really had to learn that on your toes mentality and pushing forward no matter what the adversity. And that's an energy thing, because if you're working with people that are really energetic, that are really really talented and really fearless in a way, you can accomplish almost anything. And even the most horrifying of broadcasts that you're about, people are still loading content as you're clicking go live. Like, you can get through because you're working with a powerful team. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what you need.
No, that's so true that regardless of what type of film project it is, the team is really what brings it all
Especially
together.
in features as well. I've
Yeah.
have had grueling 28-hour jobs, holding the hand of my video assistant, like, just want to get through this day, and they're like, oh, shut up, do your work. And I love that. I love that, and that camaraderie is not lost on features either. A lot of the projects that I've worked were enjoyable mostly because of the people. While I don't enjoy the process of feature filmmaking, because I get bored.
Yeah.
I'm a bored person. I gotta keep moving. Like, I like the chaotic energy. Give me all that. But yeah, especially in features that have a lot of really stressful, like, multicam shoots, and that's kind of what I started specializing in before I even got into broadcast. It's just multicamera.
Okay.
And understanding how all those mechanics work, and where to position people and what works, what can you break and what can't you break. Well, it's like half of my education on multicam camera work before I'd ever cut sports or anything like that.
And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Producer Podcast. Join us next time as we continue our conversation with Nathan Tauch on live stream and broadcast productions, as well as talk to him about how to manage a work-family life balance. Until then, make sure to subscribe to the Producer Podcast, and thanks for listening.